This is part 2 in a series. Please listen to the first episode before continuing with this release. This is The Fall Line.
He was always a go-getter. He was always wanting to better himself. And he'd always been sending back, money back to Mexico to his family. And he says, I want to build a little house down there for me. His brother was going to help him, and he learned a lot from his brother.
Last time on The Fall Line, we told you about the disappearance of a man, Salvador Chava Sanchez Azcona, from his adopted home of Collier County, Florida. Chava lived in the Golden Gate area of Collier and spent his time working at several businesses run by his friend and employer, J.P. Kuslik. Otherwise, he spent his time enjoying the local recreation, everything from bars and barrel races to outdoor barbecues and swimming and four-wheeling. During his time in town, Chava had built a wide and diverse group of friends, and he was well-known and well-liked. When Chava failed to show for work on Monday, March 7th, 2016, his roommates called his sister Dolores. Dolores was living in South Carolina at the time, and she wasn't immediately panicked. See, March 7th was the one-year anniversary of their father's death, and she thought her brother might have taken the day off to grieve. But his employer, he was worried. JP and Chava were very close, and JP always got a call when something was wrong, if Chava was sick or in trouble, or if he just needed the day off. When JP couldn't get in touch with Chava that morning, he drove to his home in Golden Gate Estates. That's where Chava's roommate said that last they knew, he'd been at some party, but they didn't have any details. Later, Chava's best friend told JP that the party had actually been at a local ranch. But when JP spoke to the ranch owner, he was told that Chava left the party around 7 p.m. and headed to a local bar. This information sent JP back and forth across town, questioning bartenders and waitresses who knew Chava. And by mid-morning, he'd finally pieced together a fragmented and confusing story. It seems that Chava had left the party at the ranch with someone in a dark Dodge truck. Chava's own truck was a blue Ford, and he'd gone to several local night spots. He hadn't stayed long, and according to the staff, he'd come inside to ask where he could get cocaine. That was hard for everyone to believe. Not just JP, but the bar and restaurant staff as well. It was absolutely out of character for Chava to have any involvement with cocaine, much less to actively seek it out. It was even odder that he'd come in, asked, and almost immediately left. Something was very, very wrong. Chava's truck wasn't at the bars, or the ranch, or anywhere else, including a parking lot where someone from the ranch said that JP and his friends might find it. That Monday morning, JP had been keeping his wife up to date on his search. After JP had found out all he could, they both decided to call local law enforcement and report Chava as a missing person. After they both made calls, an officer came out to their office to discuss the disappearance. Reporting a missing adult can be difficult, especially in the early stages of a disappearance, but Chava's case would be even harder.
The first officer that came out said, well, there's nothing we can do. He's not a legal citizen, so there's nothing we can do. My wife said, excuse me? Well, yeah, he's got to, he could have just disappeared back to Mexico or, God only knows what. And I didn't take that for an answer. So I called a personal friend and inside the sheriff's department and reached out to him. And I said, I don't ever call and I don't ever ask for anything. I said, but I'm asking for this. And I explained to him what was going on. He said, give me 5 minutes. Within 10 minutes, 15 minutes max, he had a detective he had a missing persons on the phone with me. By that afternoon, I had 5 detectives on the case.
On this podcast, we've discussed the difficulty that can face family and friends who have a missing relative who is undocumented, or if others close to that missing person are themselves living without documentation. You know by now that that's where a portion of our nation's missing come from. There is a way, though, that victims of crime who don't have documentation can pursue justice, and it's under a few special visas. Though how many people are aware of their existence, that's questionable. Immigration Services specifically lists 2 exceptions that can be granted to victims of crime. First, there's U non-immigrant status, which is defined as the following, quote, "The U status visa is set aside for victims of certain crimes who've suffered mental or physical abuse and are helpful to law enforcement or government officials in the investigation or prosecution of criminal activity." Apparently for that visa, domestic violence is a particular focus. And there's also T non-immigrant status, which is established for those that the government defines as trafficking victims. Applicants for both can also apply for derivative U visas for their family members. Per U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, these special visas were created to increase crime reporting and aid in investigation. For a U visa, the process requires a number of filings, including a signed statement from an official verifying the applicant's helpfulness. And a maximum of 10,000 non-derivative U visas can be issued a year. The backlog in 2016 was 64,000 applicants. But no legal status exists until a visa is approved, and an applicant can be detained or deported while their paperwork is under review. Some applicants have waited years for a decision. Thus, this is not a straightforward path to safe reporting, and there's no guarantee that a visa will be granted even after an application and a long wait, which means that, to come forward, a victim or witness is still at risk. And if they are at risk, so are their loved ones. And further, neither of these options address the reporting of missing persons. Most online resources that do exist in that area, they focus on reporting and searching for people who may have disappeared during border crossing. They outline support for families and attempt to identify the bodies of people who've died on the way to the United States. But little accessible information exists to help someone who needs to report a missing undocumented adult without jeopardizing the safety of their loved one or themselves. Down in Collier County, Florida, Chava's friends managed it. But he was actually reported by the Q-Slicks, who are white and whose immigration status is not in question. And there's another factor at play, too. The strong public presence of Chava's friends and their search teams likely attracted more news coverage than the average missing man, especially a missing man of color, would have received. The searches began on Monday and continued through that first week, with Chava's loved ones teaming up in trucks, on foot, on four-wheelers, and on horseback to go through some of the denser terrain in that area. This is when local news reports began to provide information on the search and what the authorities were or weren't saying about their own investigation. It was that combined search force of friends and law enforcement that brings us to the Super 8 motel, where we began our last episode, and to that same wooded area behind it where authorities found Heather King's body in 2015. In that lot, in March of 2016, they found Chava's blue Ford truck. A patrolling security guard first spotted it. Strange, since no one ever said anything about Chava going to the Super 8. His friend JP had gotten plenty of stories during the search, including one that involved dropping Chava's car off in a totally different lot, but nothing hinted that he'd been at a motel. That said, WINK News described the Super 8 as, quote, being close to the ranch where Chava was said to have attended a party. According to NBC2, the search area was soon swarming with officers. Quote, people staying nearby described seeing between 5 and 6 deputy cars and the Collier County Sheriff's helicopter in the sky. When they found Chava's truck, they also found his wallet and keys. And though the initial reports did not reveal this, there was blood spatter in the cab of the truck. JP Cusick remembers getting the news.
So he went missing on Monday. His truck was found on Wednesday. How did you find out that it had been found?
I got a phone call from deputies.
And did they give you news about what was found inside at that time?
They did. They said there was enough blood in there that They said they found enough blood inside the vehicle, and this come from a friend inside the department. They said that there was enough blood found inside the vehicle that he possibly couldn't have made it.
This discovery was ominous, but it also increased the intensity of the search effort. As WINK News reported, quote, his story has flooded social media sites and has family, friends, and strangers looking for him. They actually quote a local who wrote on Facebook, quote, Chava, we love you. We will find you safe and sound. None of this makes sense. Something isn't adding up. In my heart, I believe that he's still alive. Initially, local authorities didn't publicly comment on the case, though they would later release statements. So JP Kuslik and his other friends, they did their own fact-finding. To do that, JP first focused on the establishment of a reward to encourage tips from the community.
When did you release the reward information?
Monday. It was Tuesday when spoke to us and said that had gotten a visit 3:30. It would have been 3:30 Monday morning by the ranch owner and his brother to bury a cow. So this guy worked for him. He didn't think nothing of it. He got up and they went, and they were going to go bury this cow. So they dig the hole, and then they go home. So once I found out this information, of course, I let them know that. I let the law enforcement know that as well.
And do you know the details? Do you know if that gentleman and his father just dug the hole and left and said that they never saw the cow?
As far as I know, they dug the hole and left.
And they were able to identify where on the property they had dug?
Yes.
And then subsequently law enforcement searched that area?
They did. They did. They took forensic samples and everything else of the area.
At this point in the narrative, Collier County news stations pick up the story. Coverage describes a search at the ranch where Chava had attended a party. And that's the property JP was referring to, where a cow had allegedly been buried. The ranch wasn't in any main stretch of town. That particular area doesn't have a name, but twice, local news reporters referred to the neighborhood as, quote, a small community behind the local landfill. When local news reporters canvassed that area, they were able to speak with neighbors, some of whom knew Chava. One woman, Robin Martinez, was interviewed multiple times. She said it was frightening to think of what might have been happening so close to their homes. If Chava had indeed encountered violence there, she was worried for his family, who must have been on, quote, pins and needles. Robin was right. Dolores, who was several states away, had made plans to come to town. She was warned, though, by one of Chava's friends that she should be careful in Collier, that she'd be in danger. This person told Dolores that she'd better stay with the Kuslik family. So Dolores decided to travel down with two male friends for protection. When she arrived, she tried to find out more about her brother's disappearance. Meanwhile, JP awaited the results of the search at the ranch. That lead of the cow being buried, it was the best information anyone had come to him with. Though searches for Chava hadn't stopped, this was the only tip provided that gave investigators an actual place to look. WINK News reported that the search at the ranch went on for 2 days. Quote, detectives surrounded the area and brought in a front-end loader provided by Collier County to dig up a large area on the side of the home. The Collier County Sheriff's Office has not said if detectives uncovered anything in the dirt, end quote. But as for JP, he was aware of the results of that excavation.
Although they found an area of dirt that had been disturbed, they were not able to find a cow.
No.
Though the sheriff's office was still circumspect, they did speak to reporters after the excavation at the ranch property. You see, Chava's timeline was still in question. Some people said that he'd been at the 8-Ball Sports Bar, but there were others who said he'd been dropped off in a parking lot, and others who reported last seeing him at that party at the ranch. Then there were the witnesses that placed him at other bars, but being driven around by someone else, and in search of cocaine, which it seems that he didn't use or sell or otherwise deal in. Now, neighbors in the community behind the landfill, they did say that there was regular drug activity in the area, but no one said Chava had anything to do with it. JP Kuslik's information had borne fruit, at least in that further searches were being done. From that point in the investigation, the entire narrative of Chava's night was treated as possibility rather than fact. Local outlet NBC2 interviewed Collier County Sheriff Sergeant Jason Rubleski. He told them, quote, "We take these cases very seriously until we find him or it turns into something else. Where he was last seen is certainly important to us." He also told NBC2 that the Sheriff's Department had expanded their interviews to include patrons of the bar or bars Chava was said to have visited. Perhaps someone had seen something, even something small, something they didn't even know was a clue. Rubleski wouldn't comment on what they were looking for on the ranch property, but he did tell NBC2 that employees of the ranch were questioned. Reporter Lucas Sealer said that the ranch owner declined to comment as well. NBC2 also reported that at some point, Chava had actually worked at the ranch, but we don't have more information on that subject. But as he was working out of a short-term day labor office prior to his employment with JP, he could have spent time at any number of businesses. During the search of the ranch, NBC2 again interviewed neighbor Robin Martinez, who'd had a clear view of the sheriff's search. She told reporters it was frightening to think about something happening in their small, remote neighborhood. Further, she said, quote, "If there's some kind of foul play involved, it would be nice to get this wrapped up as quickly as possible." According to what Martinez saw, the search was extensive. She saw helicopters circling overhead and multiple vehicles coming and going from the property. As for JP and Chava's other friends, they spent that time slowly piecing together more information about Chava's night. From what they discovered, it seems that at least some people Chava knew had been involved in drugs, and that some of those same acquaintances might have, in turn, involved Chava, possibly against his will. If Chava had indeed gone around town in search of drugs, there was reason to believe that his life was in danger that night.
Supposedly, there was what I guess they call a brick of cocaine had come up missing.
And was this after Chava had disappeared?
Yes.
You can kind of put two and two together. If he didn't have a personal need for cocaine, but he had a friend who was in need of cocaine in order to appease the ranch owner.
No, not at all. Chava wouldn't have helped in that aspect. Like I said, Chava didn't run those circles.
But if he had blamed him and they said...
If blamed him and then he...
Yeah, you better replace that you stole or we're gonna...
Yep.
JP's further point was that if Chava needed something, even suddenly, even because of some trouble, he had plenty of people he could call on for help, including JP himself. When it came to the drugs, Dolores heard a similar story, but with a few details shifted. Someone called her up in Spartanburg before she came down to Florida. This person seemed to have information on Chava, but also told Dolores a story that she had a difficult time believing.
She said something about my brother was involved on drugs. I don't say he was or he not, because I don't know, really. And I love him like my son. I don't believe that because when he always needs money, he always calls me.
Ultimately, Dolores' theory lines up with JP's, that likely Chava was blamed for something and was then told that he had to make things right or suffer some consequence. So, why didn't he call JP or Dolores? We don't know. To protect them, maybe, or because he had no idea he was in trouble until it was right upon him. Either option seems reasonable. He had circles of acquaintances who were involved in illegal activity, but it hadn't touched him. Not unless he was put into their hemisphere against his will. But ultimately, it doesn't matter if Chava was involved in drugs or not. It doesn't change the fact that he is loved, that he's missing, and no one has been arrested in his disappearance. He left behind dozens of friends and family and his own plans. Plans for a future built with the focus and business savvy and charm he'd had since childhood. The various people who were rumored to see him last, they're not talking. Chava was in some kind of trouble that night. The stories from the bartender and the waitress, they support that theory. And apparently he tried to solve that trouble himself. As a vulnerable person, he likely would not have turned to law enforcement for help, and the precarious positions of many in his community may have made it more difficult to find out exactly what occurred.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
According to a 2017 report by the American Immigration Council, immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than the general population. But various studies have shown that people without documentation are also less likely to report crime and can be more likely to be victims of it. Those crimes can include everything from robbery, especially after check cashing, to domestic violence, to assault or blackmail or workplace exploitation. Maybe you remember a story from season 6 of The Fall Line when we told you about a police officer in Polk County, Georgia, who preyed on undocumented immigrants. He pulled them over while driving in order to extort money and terrified an entire community who couldn't report him. Maybe that's an isolated incident, but the fear is a little more widespread. According to our interview subjects, in Collier County, there were a variety of reasons why people were reluctant to come forward. And their fear actually seemed to be twofold. Worry about immigration for some and fear of major players in the drug game for others.
So at this point, how much is the reward that you have out?
It started out at 5,000. We upped it to 10. I had flyers up, everything. Still post to this day. And then I had another guy. That did stop in one day. He didn't even walk in the front door of my business. He actually parked in the back alley and came in through the back door to speak to me because he didn't want to be seen there, just in case.
So everyone in town is very aware of the ranch owner.
They are, absolutely. But everybody in town also knows me.
We are told that Chava's case is open and active, though there have been no recent updates in Collier's local papers or TV news broadcasts. The Collier County Sheriff's Office declined an interview with us for this episode, but Dolores does stay in contact with the investigator assigned to her brother's case. As for further information regarding Chava's whereabouts, the same stories have circulated, but resolution hasn't come. What compelled Chava to go out that night for a ride in someone else's truck? If he was seeking cocaine, had a threat been made? People employed at the ranch who'd been at the party the last night Chava was seen, they've generally refused interviews with local reporters. Though they did tell NBC2 that nothing had been found in the search of their property. If there had been a grave, or a cow, or anything, or anyone else, remains had been moved before the search was conducted. There are no other stories of where Chava Sanchez, if he was indeed killed, might be buried. Collier's a big county, and there is so much land to cover. It's been 4 years. Salvador Sanchez Azcona remains on that missing persons website with the other disappearances that occurred in 2016, 3 adult men and 2 juveniles. Chava's friends and family are waiting for answers too. Certainly, there are people in Collier County who know exactly what happened to Chava. Someone had to park his truck behind that Super 8 motel, and someone had to leave his keys and wallet inside. Someone knew about the blood spatter in that cab. And with the reward still in place, $10,000, maybe they'll come forward. We asked JP if he had any last thoughts to share on Chava and the case.
I want justice for my friend is what I want. He didn't deserve this. He was by far probably one of the kindest-hearted, sweetest people you'd ever meet in your life. Always willing to help, always willing to go above and beyond. And he didn't deserve this. He doesn't deserve this. And I just want justice for him. I want answers.
JP told us that he often thinks about the weekends they spent together, swapping stories, talking about their families, and sometimes what the future might hold. It's not surprising that Chava had big dreams and a long-term plan. Based on what his loved ones have told us, that was a big part of his essential self. During our interview, JP remembered one of those conversations.
One of the things he told me that he always wanted to do and never did get a chance to do was he wanted to move back to Veracruz and open up his own little restaurant cantina thing. And I said, all right, and unfortunately he never did get a chance to do that. But when I opened up my first wedding barn down here in South Florida, we built a public arena for the community. And when we opened that kitchen, we actually named it Chava's.
Wow.
It was basically in memory of his dream.
As for Dolores, as of the spring of 2020, she had no updates she could share. It's difficult for her to talk about the brother who was almost like a son, basically her oldest child, the one she helped raise during his first tenuous year and through his childhood. Though she once had 13 siblings, most of her brothers and sisters have died. Only 5 of them are alive today, and Dolores counts Chava in that number. It's hard for her to think of him as any other way. After her interview, Dolores sent us a letter that she'd written to Chava. She told us she wrote it in the months after his disappearance. She hopes that he can read it himself one day. She hopes that she'll see him standing at her doorway in Spartanburg, dropping in for a surprise visit. In fact, he'd done that for the first time in 7 years, not long before he vanished. Dolores hangs on to that memory. Dolores' letter has been translated from Spanish and is read for us by a voice actor.
This started the day I found out Mom was expecting you. They were happy, but I was angry, full of jealousy. And I was saying to myself, how is it possible that they feel so happy if they won't be able to manage all of us because of another child? But the time passed and you arrived. I was not happy or full of joy like the others. One of our sisters bought everything you needed. It kept making me more and more jealous. I was not the baby. I always believed that you were taking our mother's love away from me. When you were first brought home, I approached you. I saw you, so small and skinny, that I was afraid to touch you. I did not even dare to take your fragile hand. You were so little and defenseless. But my foolish pride in being strong and showing everyone that I didn't agree with your arrival made me not accept you. Time kept passing and you kept growing. I couldn't resist you anymore with your curiosity and the little faces you made. You ended up stealing my heart. That was when my fight for you began. When I was able to, I would take you with me wherever I could. You were my pride, my light. I still remember those antics, or the day I accidentally hurt your finger, the day I bathed you in cold water, when you got bad grades and I couldn't even scold you. Even though I knew you were doing something wrong, I just hugged you and told you to behave yourself. I also remember when I had to abandon you in order to leave that city. What a mistake I made. I still feel guilty. When I could finally bring you here, I remember seeing you sleep, and at that moment I felt that time had not gone by. You were already a man, but you were still my little brother. I also remember that when you said that you were going to move from the city, and I begged you not to leave. Things are not so easy. Stay here. You looked at me. You smiled and answered, Sister, sis, don't worry. I know how to take care of myself. I'm already a man. And I could not do anything. You left. I know that all the time we stayed in touch, but it was never enough. I missed you so much. And now that I do not see you or hear your voice, my pain is increasing every day. I just want you to know that I love you. You are and will always be my little brother.
If you have any information concerning the disappearance of Salvador Chava Sanchez Azcona, please contact the Collier County Sheriff's Office at 239-774-4434. There is a $10,000 reward in his case. You can also report anonymous tips to Crime Stoppers at 1-800-780-TIPS. We'd like to thank all the listeners who've taken the time to support our sponsors, leave us reviews, or support our show directly on Patreon. We couldn't do it without you. Special thanks to Angie Dodd, and thanks to Rebecca C., a Naples local who helped us with the town layout. Thanks also to Nancy Rivera, who did translation work for these episodes. And a very special thanks to our friend Esther Ludlow of Once Upon a Crime, who read Dolores' letter at the close of the episode. If you haven't listened to Esther's show, please check it out. She does series on a variety of topics. A few of my favorite episodes are her coverage of the missing and murdered women of Juarez and her deep dive into the history of the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. If you'd like to suggest a case for coverage, please visit thefalllinepodcast.com and click on the link that says Case Submissions. You can also check our blog for case updates, and we're currently collecting funds there to keep the Millbrook Twins billboard in place. If you're unfamiliar with their case, we covered the disappearance of 15-year-old twins, Jeanette and Danette Millbrook, in Season 1. They disappeared in Augusta, Georgia, in March of 1990. Their case was improperly closed for decades, and now that it's open again, their family is desperate for resolution. A few years back, the Fall Lines listeners raised a $10,000 reward in their case, and that billboard is how we communicate that information to the citizens of Augusta. So, if you'd like to help, you can find a link in our show notes. The Fall Line is created by Laura Norton and Brooke Hargrove, and is produced and mastered by Maura Curry. Written, researched, and hosted by Laura Norton, with interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Research assistants are Kim Fritz, Lex Weathers, and Brian Waters. Content advisement for this episode provided by Guadalupe Lopez. Our regular content advisors are Brandy C. Williams, Vic Kennedy, and Liv Fallon. Theme music is by RJR. You can find Fall Line merchandise in the Exactly Right Podswag store. Our current monthly donation is going to the Sovereign Bodies Institute. And please check out our website blog for other organizations we donate to and which could use your support. Everyone enjoys a little mystery. And on the new podcast, One Strange Thing, that's just what you'll get. I'm host Laura Norton. Join me every other week to explore forgotten stories from America's news archives that have something in common, a single element that can't quite be explained. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.